The gate agent tore the boarding pass in half before Marcus Webb even finished handing it over. She did it cleanly, one motion, like she had done it 1,000 times before and had never once been wrong. "Sir," she said, her voice carrying just enough volume for the 8 people standing nearby to hear every word. "This seat has already been assigned to another passenger. You'll need to move to the economy section, or we will not be able to board you today." Marcus Webb stood at Gate 7 of Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson Airport at 6:22 in the morning. He was wearing a gray hoodie that had been washed too many times. He had a single carry-on bag. He had not shaved in 4 days. He looked, to anyone passing by, like a man who had overbooked his week and was running low on everything. He looked at the 2 pieces of his boarding pass. He looked at the gate agent. He did not raise his voice. "All right," he said quietly. He stepped aside. 41 minutes later, the same gate agent would be standing in a different part of that terminal. She would not be holding a boarding pass scanner. She would not be wearing her name badge. She would be on a call with the airline's HR department, and she would be shaking. Stay until the end. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. Marcus Webb woke up at 4:45 that morning in the same way he had woken up every morning for the last 11 years. No alarm. He simply opened his eyes, sat up, and was already thinking. He was 53 years old. He had been in the aviation industry for 29 years. 4 airlines, 2 continents, and 1 company that he had built from a $400,000 loan into something worth considerably more than that. He did not think about the number often. He thought about the work. His assistant, Diane, had offered to book him a car to the airport. He declined. She offered to arrange a private terminal. He declined that too. "I'll take the regular flight," he told her the previous afternoon, and she had learned in her 3 years working for him not to ask why. He always had a reason. He never explained it unless the reason was needed by someone else. He kept a specific morning routine that had not changed in almost a decade. He made 1 cup of black coffee, no sugar. He read 3 pages of whatever book he was in the middle of. Not more, not less. He folded his clothes the night before, so nothing required a decision in the morning. He carried his own bag to the car always, even in hotels where staff moved toward him instinctively with the expectation of carrying it. He had stopped noticing this expectation. Or rather, he noticed it and simply walked past it. That morning, his phone had 9 unread messages. 3 were from a member of his board, a man named Gerald Foster who had been with the company for 7 years, and who did not typically send messages before 7 a.m. unless something was pressing. 2 more were from the company's legal team. 1 was from the vice president of operations. He read none of them. He set the phone face down on the passenger seat of the car, and he watched the highway pass outside the window. He had been in business long enough to know that if something truly required him before he had finished his coffee, someone would call, not text. No one called. The morning remained quiet, which meant the morning was his. What he did not know, what he could not have known sitting in that car watching the city, still dark outside the window, was that 47 people had been in a room the previous evening trying to reach a decision that required his signature. The room was on the 14th floor of a building in Atlanta. The decision involved $312 million and a contract renewal that expired in 19 hours. And the only person who could sign it was currently watching the highway and thinking about the book he had left on his nightstand. His carry-on bag contained 3 things: a laptop, a manila folder with 12 pages in it, and a bottle of water he had filled at the hotel before leaving. The folder was the reason for the trip. The laptop was a backup. He did not travel with status symbols. He traveled with what the work needed. He arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson at 5:58 a.m. He printed his boarding pass at the self-check kiosk, 1B, first class, a window seat he had specifically selected because the window seat on the left side of that aircraft gave him clean sight lines over the right wing, and he found something useful in watching the machinery of flight from that angle. He had paid $1,847 for that seat 3 weeks ago. He got in line. He drank the last of his coffee. He waited. He had learned a long time ago that the most important thing a person could do in any situation was to give it exactly as much energy as it deserved, no more. The rest was noise. Transair Flight 142 was scheduled to depart Atlanta for Chicago O'Hare at 7:10 a.m. Gate 7 in the D terminal was managed that morning by a senior gate agent named Sandra Pruitt. Sandra had been with Transair for 16 years. She was known, according to her last 4 performance reviews, as one of the most efficient gate agents in the Atlanta hub. She had won the Regional Customer Service Award twice. Her supervisor, a district operations manager named Kevin Tran, had written in her most recent review that Sandra was among the most reliable staff members in a high-pressure environment. She took that seriously. She had printed the review and kept it in the top drawer of her desk. Sandra ran Gate 7 the way she ran every gate. Methodically, efficiently, and with a precision that she had developed over 16 years of managing late arrivals, confused passengers, upgrade disputes, and everything in between. She knew the policies better than most of the managers above her. She cited them not to be difficult, but because she believed in the system. The system, when followed correctly, worked. She had seen it work thousands of times. That morning, she had arrived 22 minutes before her shift began. She had reviewed the manifest, noted the VIP upgrades, flagged 3 potential boarding complications, and refilled the printer paper before the previous shift agent had even put on her coat. There were 2 gates to her left currently dealing with ourselves. Hers was running clean. At 6:07 a.m., a couple approached the first-class check-in lane. Their names were Preston and Cora Whitfield. They were regulars on Transair, platinum status, 46 flights in the previous year, and they were loud in the specific way that people who have been given consistent preferential treatment eventually become. They were not cruel. They were simply used to things going their way, and they expressed mild discomfort whenever anything suggested it might not. Sandra handled them smoothly. She confirmed their seats, offered an upgrade on their checked luggage fee, and sent them through the gate with a warm smile. She was good at her job. That part was not in question. The departure board above Gate 7 read 7:10 a.m. The time was 6:19 a.m. Boarding would begin in 9 minutes. Sandra had 14 first-class seats on this flight to manage. Seat 1B had been paid for by a passenger named Marcus Webb. The booking had been in the system for 21 days. The name was there in black and white on the manifest. She had seen it when she reviewed the list that morning. She had also received an email at 5:53 a.m. from Preston Whitfield. The email was addressed to Transair's premium passenger liaison and had been forwarded to her gate directly. It requested that Seat 1B be made available for Preston's wife, Cora, as their assigned seats, 3A and 3C, were not adjacent, and Cora preferred window seating. The email noted, in language that was politely firm and unmistakably entitled, that their status with the airline should make this a simple accommodation. Sandra had read that email twice. She had made a decision. She had not verified whether Seat 1B was occupied or whether the passenger in 1B had a preference that needed to be considered. She acted on the email. When Marcus Webb walked up to the gate at 6:21 a.m., she already had the decision made. She saw the gray hoodie. She saw the worn carry-on. She saw a man who did not, in her specific understanding of the word, look like the kind of passenger who was going to argue over a seat upgrade request from a platinum couple. She acted on that judgment as efficiently as she acted on everything else. The boarding clock on the wall behind her said 51 minutes to departure. She tore the boarding pass in half. Marcus Webb watched her tear it and said nothing for 3 full seconds. "Sir," Sandra said, already moving to the computer terminal, Seat 1B has been reassigned to accommodate a premium status passenger. I can offer you Seat 22F in economy, which is an aisle seat, or I can rebook you on the 9:45 departure if you prefer. We apologize for the inconvenience." She said it the way a person says something they have said many times before. Practiced, clean, final. 1B is my assigned seat, Marcus said. His voice was quiet, not aggressive, simply accurate. I purchased it 3 weeks ago. Sandra looked at him briefly, then back at the screen. I understand, sir. However, due to our premium accommodation policy, seat assignments in first class are occasionally subject to adjustment when higher-tier status passengers require adjacent seating. Your ticket value will be partially refunded for the class difference. He placed his boarding pass, both halves, on the counter in front of her. These 2 pieces together show a confirmed booking for Seat 1B on this flight. My name is on your manifest. She glanced at the torn pass. She did not pick it up. Sir, I've already processed the reassignment. The seat is no longer available. I can help you with 22F or a rebooking. She looked past him toward the growing line behind. A man 2 spots back in the economy boarding line heard all of it. His name was James Okafor. He was a software engineer from Nairobi, traveling to Chicago for a conference. He watched the gate agent without expression, then quietly looked back down at his phone. He had seen versions of this before. He did not say anything. He shifted his weight slightly to his left foot and waited. A woman in the seats to the right of the gate, gray coat, reading glasses pushed up on her head, lowered her book and watched the counter. She was 59 years old. She had been flying for 30 years. She recognized what was happening and felt the specific discomfort of someone who knew they should say something and did not know exactly what to say. A teenage boy near the charging station looked up from his phone, watched for a moment, looked at his mother beside him who was not paying attention, and looked back at his phone. Marcus picked up both halves of the boarding pass. He placed them carefully in the front pocket of his carry-on bag. He straightened up. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," he said. Sandra's expression did not change. "I am the senior agent on duty this morning. The decision has been made through our standard policy process." She clicked something on the keyboard. "If you'd like to file a complaint, I can give you our customer relations number." "That won't be necessary," Marcus said. Pause. He picked up his bag. He nodded once at Sandra. Not warmly, not coldly, simply acknowledgement, and walked away from the gate. He did not look at Preston and Cora Whitfield, who were now seated in the first-class waiting area. He did not look back at the counter. He walked to a row of seats near the floor-to-ceiling window that looked out across the tarmac, sat down, and placed his bag on the seat beside him. He could see his aircraft from where he sat. A Transair Boeing 737, tail number visible from this distance. He looked at it for a moment. The ground crew was still doing their pre-departure walk. 2 fuel trucks on the left side, 1 catering vehicle at the rear. The whole machine of a morning flight getting itself ready. He reached into his bag. He took out his phone. He had 12 messages now. He looked at Gerald Foster's most recent one, sent at 6:17 a.m. "Marcus, the Chicago people in the building. They moved the meeting to 8 a.m. They will not wait past 9. Please confirm you are on this flight." Marcus typed back 3 words. "I'll be there." He put the phone face down on his knee. He looked at the aircraft again. The morning light was just starting to come through the terminal glass, flat and pale, and the 737 sat on the tarmac in it, entirely ordinary looking, the way powerful things often do. The fuel truck was taking slightly longer on the left side than it needed to. He noticed this the way he noticed most things. Without judgment, simply as information, his phone rang. It was Gerald. "I got your message," Gerald said. "Are you checked in?" "There was a small thing at the gate," Marcus said. "It's handled." A pause on Gerald's end. "Are you on the flight?" "I'll be on the flight," Marcus said. "Tell the Chicago team I'll be at the table by 8:15. He ended the call. He put the phone in his pocket. He sat quietly in the terminal and watched a ground crew worker navigate a baggage cart around the nose of the aircraft with the slow, deliberate precision of someone who had done this enough times to stop hurrying. While Marcus was watching the tarmac, Sandra Pruitt was at her gate counter filling out the standard involuntary seat reassignment form, a form required by Transair policy anytime a confirmed seat was given to another passenger without that passenger's consent. The form, once completed, was automatically filed with the airline's senior operations log. That log was reviewed every morning at 7:00 a.m. by the Director of Flight Operations for the Atlanta Hub. The Director of Flight Operations for the Atlanta Hub was a woman named Patricia Ewan. Patricia had been in that role for 4 years. She reported to the VP of Operations. The VP of Operations, David Osei, had been sending Marcus Webb messages since 6:08 a.m. On the 14th floor of the Transair Executive Building on the east side of the airport complex, the morning had not been quiet for anyone. The meeting had started at 5:45 a.m. There were 11 people in the room. 3 of them had flown in from Chicago the previous evening. 2 were attorneys. The remaining 6 were Transair executives, and all of them had, at various points in the past 72 hours, tried to reach a single person and failed. The contract on the table was called the Meridian Infrastructure Agreement. It covered the operational management of 6 regional hubs, including Atlanta, Denver, and Seattle. The total value over 7 years was $312 million. Transair had been negotiating this contract for 8 months. The counterparty, a logistics and operations group, had agreed to every material term. There was one condition. The counterparty's board required that the signatory on the Transair side be a specific individual, not a delegate, not a proxy, not someone acting in the capacity of. The specific individual was Marcus Webb. This was because Marcus Webb was not simply a CEO. He was the founder of Apex Operations Group, the parent company that held a 31% controlling stake in Transair. He had founded Apex 22 years ago. He had taken it public 11 years later. He had served on the Transair board for 9 years and had been the de facto final authority on all major partnership agreements since the airline's restructuring in 2019. His signature was, legally and practically, the only one that could close this deal. The Meridian team's lead attorney, a woman named Christine Park, had said it plainly at 5:48 a.m. Our client will not accept a delegate signature on this agreement, mister. Webb signs or we take this to the competing shortlist. We have a 9 a.m. hard stop. After that, our client has committed to meetings with another party. 11 people in that room. 11 people who needed Marcus Webb's signature before 9 a.m. 11 people who had collectively sent him 23 messages in the last 16 hours. Gerald Foster, sitting at the far end of the conference table, was on his third attempt to reach David Ossie when Christine Park's assistant, a young man named Timothy, who had been with the firm for 7 weeks, leaned forward slightly in his chair. He had been quiet for the entire meeting. He had not spoken once. He had been reviewing something on his tablet while the senior people in the room talked, and he had gone very still. He raised his hand. It was a small motion, the kind a person makes when they are not sure they should be speaking. "Excuse me," Timothy said. I may be wrong about this, but is the Mr. Webb you're referring to Marcus Webb? Apex Operations? Gerald Foster looked at him. Yes. Timothy turned his tablet around slowly and placed it on the table. On the screen was the Transair morning flight manifest for Atlanta to Chicago. Flight 1142, and there, in seat 1B, confirmed, booked, paid, was the name Marcus A. Webb. The room went completely quiet. Christine Park looked at the tablet. She looked at Gerald. "He's here. He's in this building. He's at the gate," Gerald said. He was already standing, his chair scraped back. "He's at gate 7. Can someone reach him?" another attorney asked. "He's been reading messages as unavailable for the last hour," Gerald said. "He's in the terminal." He was already walking toward the door. While the Chicago team's attorneys were collecting their documents from the conference table, Sandra Pruitt was at gate 7 beginning the boarding announcement for economy passengers. She had her scanner ready. The Whitfields were in the first-class boarding lane. The morning was running clean. While Gerald Foster was stepping into the elevator on the 14th floor, Patricia Ewan, the director of flight operations, one floor below, was reviewing the morning's operations log. She read the involuntary reassignment form filed at 6:24 a.m. She read the passenger name on the reassigned seat. She put her coffee down. She read it again. She picked up her phone. She called David Ossie directly. David Ossie was the VP of operations. He had been trying to reach Marcus Webb since 6:08 a.m. He answered Patricia's call on the first ring. She said 4 words, "Marcus Webb, gate 7. The silence on his end lasted exactly 2 seconds. "Get someone to that gate," he said. Marcus was still watching the tarmac when Gerald Foster came through the terminal corridor at something between a fast walk and a run. Gerald was 61 years old and had not moved that quickly through an airport in several years. He was breathing hard when he reached the row of seats by the window. He stopped in front of Marcus. Marcus looked up. His expression did not change. "The Meridian people are upstairs," Gerald said. He was still catching his breath. They moved the meeting to 8. Christine Park said 9. 0 is the absolute deadline. "I know," Marcus said. He stood up and picked up his carry-on. "Your gate, there was an issue with your seat." Gerald glanced toward gate 7, then back. Patricia called David. "They're handling it." "Good," Marcus said. "Do you?" Gerald paused. "What happened?" Marcus zipped his bag closed. "Someone made a decision about a seat. It happens." He looked at Gerald. "What does Christine's team need from me before I sign?" "Any last-minute changes to Section 4. Gerald stared at him for a moment, the way a person stares when they expected a different conversation and have not adjusted yet. Then he pulled himself together. "No changes. Clean copy, pen and signature." "Then let's go up," Marcus said. He walked with Gerald toward the corridor that led back to the main terminal. Behind him, at gate 7, 2 things were happening at the same time. David Ossie, VP of Operations, had arrived at the gate counter. He was not in a hurry. That part was already over. He stood at the counter and asked Sandra Pruitt to pull up the reassignment form she had filed at 6:24 a.m. She pulled it up. He read it. He asked her to tell him, in her own words, what had happened. She told him. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked one question. "Did you check whether the passenger in 1B had a confirmed booking before you reassigned the seat?" She started to answer. She stopped. She started again. In the first-class boarding lane, Preston Whitfield was checking his phone. Cora had already boarded. He was mid-message to someone when a second Transair manager in a dark blazer appeared at the gate. The two managers spoke briefly. A third call was made. Then Sandra Pruitt was asked, calmly and directly, to step away from the gate counter. The woman in the gray coat who had lowered her book earlier was still seated nearby. She had not left. She watched Sandra step away from the counter. She watched the second manager take over. She put her book in her lap and did not pick it up again. James Okafor, the software engineer who had watched the whole thing and said nothing, was already on the plane. But before he had boarded, he had taken out his phone and sent a message to a friend in London. He described what he had seen in 2 sentences. His friend would not read it for several hours, but it was sent. On the 14th floor, the room had 12 people in it now. Marcus walked in with Gerald at 7:04 a.m. He set his carry-on bag down by the wall. He took off his hoodie. He was wearing a plain white button-down underneath. He sat down at the table across from Christine Park. "I apologize for the delay," he said. "Something came up at the gate." Christine Park looked at him. She had been in contract law for 20 years. She recognized the specific kind of calm that belongs to people who have spent a long time being the most important person in any room they walk into, and who do not need anyone else to notice it. "We're glad you're here," she said simply. He opened the manila folder. He read the last 3 pages of the agreement, slowly and carefully, even though he had read them the night before. No one in the room said anything while he read. When he was done, he picked up the pen that had been placed to the right of the document and signed his name in the same steady hand he used for everything. He closed the folder. He pushed it across the table. It was 7:11 a.m. Flight 1142 had just closed its doors. The meeting lasted another 14 minutes after the signature. Christine Park's team reviewed the signed pages. A notarized copy was prepared. Hands were shaken. The Chicago attorneys left for their 9:00 a.m. commitment with 47 minutes to spare. Gerald walked them to the elevator. Marcus stayed in the room. He poured himself a cup of coffee from the side table, black, no sugar, and stood at the window that looked out over the south runway. 2 aircraft were in a slow queue for takeoff. He watched them for a moment. The morning light had shifted, warmer now, the pale gray of early morning burning off into something cleaner. David Ossie came in while Gerald was still in the hallway. David was 58 years old. He had been VP of operations for 6 years. He had worked with Marcus for 11 of those years, in various forms, and he knew better than most people the difference between a conversation Marcus wanted to have and one he was simply willing to have. "I wanted to tell you directly," David said. "The gate agent, Sandra Pruitt, she's been suspended pending a full review. The flight crew has been notified through the operations log. The Whitfield couple's booking records are being audited." Marcus looked at the runway. "Whose decision was the suspension?" "Patricia Yoon flagged the form. I made the call." Marcus nodded once. He took a sip of coffee. He did not look at David while he said what he said next. "Make sure the review is fair. She may have been working from a bad process, not just bad judgment. If the system let her make that call unchecked, that's not entirely on her." David was quiet for a moment. "Understood. And the Whitfield audit. If they sent an email directly to the gate, requesting a seat reassignment of a confirmed passenger, that needs a policy review, not just an audit. That's a gap. I'll have the policy team look at it today." "Good." Marcus turned from the window. He picked up his carry-on. "I'll need the next flight to Chicago. Whatever gets me there earliest. There's a 9:45. I can hold 2A. Book it." Marcus said. He looked at David. "And make sure Sandra Pruitt gets a proper review. Not a rubber stamp one." He picked up the manila folder. He walked out of the room. In the hallway, Gerald was coming back from the elevator. He fell into step beside Marcus. "The Meridian deal," Gerald said. "That's the biggest single agreement we've closed in 4 years." "I know," Marcus said. "And you almost missed it because of a seat reassignment." Marcus glanced at him sideways. "Almost," he said. They walked down the corridor toward the main terminal. Marcus's second boarding pass was already on his phone. 9:45, seat 2A, Chicago O'Hare. He had booked it himself while David was talking. He did not wait for things to be done for him when he could do them in less time himself. The woman in the gray coat was still in the terminal when Marcus passed through on his way to the gate area. She did not know who he was. She had not seen the conference room or the contract or any of it. She had only seen a man in a gray hoodie be told his seat was gone and walk away without raising his voice. She watched him now, walking with Gerald unhurried, carry on over one shoulder, and felt the specific satisfaction that comes from seeing that the quiet person in the room was not quiet because they had nothing to say. She picked her book back up. At gate 22, Sandra Pruitt was sitting in a chair near the operations office. Her scanner was on the desk. Her badge was beside it. The call from HR had come at 7:48 a.m. The conversation had been brief. The outcome was a suspension with a review scheduled for the following week. She was not fired, not yet. That would depend on the review. She sat with her hands in her lap and thought about the form she had filed. She thought about the email from Preston Whitfield that she had acted on. She thought about the man in the gray hoodie who had not argued, had not threatened, had simply asked for his supervisor and then walked away. She thought about what it meant that she had not looked more carefully at his name on the manifest before tearing his boarding pass in half. She did not know what his name had meant. She did not know about the contract or the 14th floor or the $312 million. She only knew that she had made a decision in 8 seconds about a man she had not looked at fully, and that the decision had been wrong. That was enough to sit with. The 9:45 to Chicago boarded at 9:22 a.m. Marcus was the third passenger through the gate. He found seat 2A, window, left side, and placed his bag in the overhead bin without assistance. He sat down. He looked at the wing. The ground crew was finishing their pre-departure check, and the morning was fully bright now. No more pale light, just clean and direct. He opened his laptop. He had 4 hours of work in the file he needed to finish before the next meeting. He started on the first page. He had not thought about Sandra Pruitt since he walked away from Gate 7. Not because what she did not matter. It did. But because the work in front of him mattered more, and he had never found it useful to give the wrong things more time than they deserved. The aircraft pushed back at 9:47 a.m., 2 minutes behind schedule. He had not said anything to anyone on the flight about what had happened that morning. He had not posted about it. He had not called anyone to recount it. It was a thing that had happened and had been handled, and now it was behind him, which was where the past belonged. The wing lifted. The ground fell away. He turned back to his laptop. He had learned, a long time ago, that the work was the answer to almost every question. Not the performance of the work, not the announcement of it. The actual, quiet, daily doing of it. The kind that didn't need to explain itself to anyone, because eventually, always, it made itself perfectly clear. If this story reaches you, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And subscribe, because the next story is already waiting above the clouds.